What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with one of my personal favorite musicians in the realm of black metal, Kim Carlsson of Lifelover, Consider Suicide, A Symphony to the Void, Hypothermia, Crawl, Life is Pain, and of the new project, Ritualmord. Thank you so much for coming on here today.
Thank you. Hi.
Yeah, it's an honor to be able to talk with you. The first thing I wanted to talk about was this year marks 20 years of Lifelover. And
Indeed.
Yep. And this is, for me, a very important band. I discovered Lifelover later. I actually discovered you in 2020 when I was in a very dark place during the pandemic and during all this. And then I discovered Pulver by, I forgot who shared about it on Facebook or something, but I discovered Pulver, and when I put on MS Salmonella for the first time, that's where things sort of changed forever. It was a musical reckoning for me in a way. So I wanted to go back because this album came out in 2006. So I was an emo 12-year-old back then. What was the sort of thought process behind Pulver? I know you had the demo beforehand, but when you compare Pulver and then compare that to Erotic and then the direction Lifelover would take, there really is nothing that sounds like it. So when we listened to this album, what was the mindset behind you and B and everybody else involved?
Well, it started with us coming home from. I took B with me to the north of Sweden, where my friend Nachtzeit, who was the drummer in Hypothermia, he's the main man behind the band Luster. And we were recording 2 albums with Hypothermia then. And I was borrowing some recording equipment from B. And he has only been recording stuff by himself at that point. And he was also a big Hypothermia fan. That is how we got to know each other, because I was running a label back then. And he wanted me to release his solo project, Dimmy, which I did the guest vocals on as well. And I brought him to the Hypothermia recording session in the north of Sweden. And we were there for a week in a cabin in the woods, like in the middle of nowhere. Really wonderful atmosphere and a great memory. And then when we got back to his apartment in Stockholm, he was very inspired to start recording something as well. And that's when we recorded the 2 songs, Stockholm and Nackskott. Those were the 2 first songs from the Pulver album that we recorded. And we didn't have any plans at that moment to make an album. We thought we'll maybe make like a 7-inch EP or something like that. And we sent them along to some friends in other bands. Like a Finnish band called Circle Forbearers, who back then were making a split with now defunct band from Netherlands, Urfaust.
Oh, I love Eric Frost. I love Eric Frost. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And they were really like one of our first supporters in the metal scene, and dear friends since then. And it's because of them that we got in touch with Go to Warex, who released the first edition of that album. And because of people that we ourselves appreciated as artists, like we were listening to the first album of Urfaust back when we were recording with Hypothermia in the north, Geist ist Teufel. And so we thought it was a great coincidence that they liked our music because we liked theirs. And they're a big part, actually. Like, it's a coincidence, but we might not have finished the first album if it wasn't for them giving us the compliment of, hey, we should have more Lifelover. And then we felt like, oh, sure, why not?
Yeah. Well,
like sometimes that's all you need, some motivation or a pat on the back, and then you're started.
Well, for me, like, I've never heard really anything like it. You know, I love all realms of black metal, from, you know, Emperor and Mayhem to, you know, like weirder bands like an Autumn for Crippled Children or something like that. But like what I find so unique
In
is,
other words, you appreciate atmosphere.
I very much do, and it's ironic too because I
Yeah.
live in the city, in the heart of New York City, where like it's the complete opposite of the Element and where you like to be in. But for some reason, there's something about the chaos of all the Life Lover albums that I think resonate. I know that isolation is the great fuel for your creativity, but the madness that's within that album perfectly, like I've listened to this on the subway in New York City or walking through Times Square through all the chaos and all that. It reflects that chaos, and I just want to know what, I know it's like cliche to ask what are your inspirations, but like there is stuff on here that, you know, some elitist black metal fans might think, what the hell is this? Like the soloing that we hear in Stockholm, or the last track, that sort of like real ambient side to it. So were you looking at other things at the time, like as outside of black metal as well?
We have always had a pretty wide appreciation for like odd music. And then B was, of course, a big fan of a lot of nu metal. So it's no secret that he was a big fan of Slipknot. So that's like one of the inspirations for some of the heavier stuff on our albums, in every sense. But we also appreciated a lot of like bleak, like pop and post-punk and stuff like that. So, and of course the great German band Bethlehem.
Oh yeah, of course.
Have always been a huge inspiration for both of us.
The lyrical aspects of Life Lover, like Bisat off of Erotic, if I pronounce that correctly, but like that is
Close enough.
fair enough. That is one of my favorite songs of all time. Actually, when I went to Stockholm in 2022, one of the first things I did was actually go to Kakastornet just to listen to that song and stare at that tower for a period of time. So for your lyrical side, did you always need the music before you came up with lyrics, or did, you know, the lyrical inspiration maybe dictate the sound that it was?
It has always been like a mix and match. So because we are several people writing, we are more people writing lyrics for the band than writing music. One of my main parts, besides being a vocalist in the band, was also being a co-producer. Which I'm not credited as, because we didn't know about such fractions back then and didn't really care about it, because we thought it would that's something we could do later. You never think that what you're doing in the moment will stop in a few years. That's usually not something you expect or assume.
Yeah, of course.
Usually we were all writing lyrics just at different times of our lives, just inspired by thoughts and emotions and experiences. And then when we feel that we have enough songs for a release, we were choosing the lyrics that fit with the atmosphere and vibe that we were going for. And of course, sometimes if you have a shorter lyric, that will usually go on a shorter song, and then if we have something longer, then we'll find something that fits that. Yeah. And then of course Jonas or B also liked, like once again with the inspiration of Slipknot, he liked having many different members doing different things on every song. So that's why we often have like maybe my lyrics or my vocals, his music, and then lyrics by 1853. Or in this case of Besat, there is my music that then B finished the recordings of and added piano to, and then of course 1853 doing the lyrics and the vocals. Mm-hmm. So like a mix and match for just the goal is to just get the optimal results, to make as great songs as possible that are a reflection of ourselves as individuals and artists, and just being really true to ourselves and That's always the goal, and that's why there's nothing like Lifelover, because most people try to be something else.
And a lot of bands that like would be compared to you guys, and not like knocking them, but like they don't sound like it. Like they have, the sort of dark melancholic nature behind it, but I don't think it can be replicated. Being back to the lyrics,
Exactly.
still, I still think one of the greatest ending lines, even though it's simple, is "Until the day you die, you will always be shit." To end with the album like that was really strong, and to have the melodic vocals on like a song like "Museum of Past Affections," I thought really kind of was very narrating and guiding you. And I believe Mental Central dialogue was more, there was a lot of repetition in those lyrics as well. So depending on what each song was about, or depending on who sang what, did it maybe resonate with you differently, or trigger a different emotion, if you will?
Well, usually when I do my vocals for a song, I listen to it as an instrumental a few times and go through my head of different ways that I can phrase the vocals, and how, because I use a lot of breath control when I do my vocals. It's like breathing more than, I don't consider it singing. It's like melodic talking almost, for me, from my perspective. And that's also in songs like that. We first had the song and we were not sure about what lyric to use, and then B had this idea of just a sentence being repeated, and that's like one of the ways that I was able to sound like 2-3 different people, and it's all in one take. There is no editing after that, and it's just by utilizing how the reverb interacts with my voice if I'm at different distances from the microphone, or if I'm cupping it or not. So by doing that, you get like a kind of natural filter, and then of course your voice changes amplitude and distortion and other things depending on how far away you are from the microphone and how much force you put into your voice and so on.
Did you?
So there's that.
You as a fan of your work alone, like whether it's Lifelover or Consider Suicide, Hypothermia, you name it,
etc.
But like when you have like your own unique mind, but then you have B, who was an original mind of his own as well, and everybody who's contributed
Definitely.
to Lifelover, from 1853 to H and everybody else. Did you all need to be in the same headspace when writing together? Because like in the end, these are very well composed songs. I'd imagine that there has to be some like mutual understanding, but being that you all were a band of individuals, how did you, was coming to an agreement, like was it maybe better if you were all in your own individual worlds? Is that maybe how we got the sound of Lifelover that we know of?
Yeah, that's also why it's a very original sound, because it was most and foremost a studio project, and it was always mainly from the creative vision of B that I did my best as a friend and producer to get the most out of. And since he was a fan of mine, he of course respected my point of view in many cases, but also one of the habits he had was he liked to have the last word. So sometimes if I didn't like something, he would replace it with something very similar, and then that would be the song. Just because he liked that was his sense of humor, to just because he could. And most of the songs were it was very rare for the other members to ever be part of recording something, and if they recorded their parts, it was always after B had finished 90% of the song.
Whose idea was it to put MS Salmonella backwards as the last song on Erotic? That was like a unique touch.
Well, it was both me and Jonas Orbi that had that idea, because first we tried with we just wanted a kind of like internal joke or a callback to the first album, because the last song of that album is like a bit mocking to whoever is in the audience, and we wanted to repeat that with the last song on Erotique. And we first tried with Nackscott, but that song is a bit more melodic, or of course Salmonella is even more melodic, but in a different way. So we just tried those two different songs and checked which one we preferred. And of course, because of all the more metal and muted parts of Salmonella and the more screams and shouts and samples, it made more sense, because especially backwards, that song becomes even more chaotic. Mm-hmm. So it added a lot of atmosphere to the album by doing that.
Yeah.
And the way that the album ends and the sample that is in Alma Salmonella, it's both from the same movie, Happiness.
Yeah. Well, I'm because the evolution, because I believe Erotic came out just a year after Paul.
Yeah, it was recorded like within 6 months of each other.
Oh wow!
So we just he was very inspired back then and also unemployed. Mm-hmm. So he was just at home, and of course I was working at 2 different restaurants, running my own record label, and having Hypothermia and Lifelover. So I was very busy, and I was also insomniac. Like I would be awake for like 48 hours and then sleep maybe 6 hours.
Wow.
And repeat that cycle. And I lived like that for like 2 or 3 years.
Wow. I mean,
because I've always been a night person. To an extreme.
Well, I mean, that's very impressive. And I mean, I just, the evolutionary jump, because I would have never have thought after hearing, you know, what I would hear on Pulver to hear I Love to Hurt You or Sweet Illness of Mine. And like, it just seems like the melodic aspects behind it. It seems like the experimentation was part of Life Lover. Even though there is a Life Lover sound, there is also so much experimentation to the point where like there was no limits at the same time, which I don't think is very easy to achieve, to be both very experimental but also have a signature sound as well.
Yeah, and back then compared to today's both music scene and also ways for artists to learn their instrument or recording, back then there wasn't YouTube, so you couldn't research and find out how to make a production like we were learning as we went. And since he was home all the time and spent all his time recording, and he had other projects too, they were just not released, and he were experimenting a lot with recording techniques and just trying a lot of different things. And that's why you can hear for every album that everything is self-produced and home recorded, but it sounds more and more like something you could find in an actual studio. And of course, if he was still alive, he would undoubtedly run his own studio by now. And that's also like since we are all inspired by different things, I think it bleeds through a lot that on Erotique there is more of atmospheric and doom rock approach on it, and of course a lot of appreciation for bands like Catatonia. So yeah.
But I have noticed that too. I've compared it to that plenty of times. I wanted to ask another question about Life Lover, because it was, you know, it's very common for bands in black metal to have the aliases that they go by, but I've always thought it was so unique, like parentheses just for your name, B, 1853, H, Fix, like I could have sworn you might have mentioned it on like your YouTube channel or something like that that aliases wasn't like your main priority, but I am wondering.
And that's why I have this, because that's the closest thing you can have to nothing. Because I've never been a person to hide myself. I've always been very open with my name, who I am, where I live. And if someone doesn't like me, I have publicly invited them to come to my place and find out what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And no one has taken me up on that offer, but that's still the case. And the main reason why we had those aliases was that, especially before you could search online as you can today, you could do that to some extent in the past, but then you would get just the home pages for different web shops. And if you're a new band but have members of other bands, 90% of all web shops or other record labels will always name drop other things you do, because that increases the chance that someone will buy that album from their shop, because they want to sell, of course. But we didn't want Lifelover to be judged based on dim human hypothermia, because then people would think it's a side project, and it's definitely not a side project.
Yeah.
Because side projects often have this kind of vibe that it's just an excuse to do something completely different. And of course, Lifelover is that, but we didn't want people to think that it's like, if people come from a dim hymn perspective, they will think, oh, this is like raw satanic black metal, and then they hear Nackscott, and they will of course be extra disappointed instead of coming with an open mind and experience it for the first time without knowing who the hell is doing the work.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense in this, but I'm wondering too, were you all still portraying, because when I think of Lifelover, I picture you with the white covered in blood in that shirt. I picture B with his interesting mask, because I know that the makeup would run off and all this, or the gas mask and whatnot. So like, were you all maybe portraying, for lack of better words, a character, or maybe an essence outside of who Kim Carlsson was or who Jonas was, etc.?
I don't think so. I think we were very much being ourselves. And by hiding our names at that moment, it still allowed us to be ourselves even more. Because, as I said, the people would expect something from us, but what you expect is based on your own experience of who I am as an artist. But you don't know me as a person, or what I was doing last year, and which in turn inspired what I did, or how I sounded like on that album, and so on. And I've many times, I can't count it on my fingers, I've sat in front of someone like this, and they've talked shit about Lifelover to me without knowing that I'm the vocalist in the band.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I've seen that happen at concerts too, plenty of times, where like I would see like a black metal band and they're wearing masks or makeup, they take their makeup off, and then somebody's clearly talking shit, and they're just like, you could just see them looking at each other, and it's like the funniest thing ever.
It's a very good social experiment, and I'm a big fan of those.
Definitely.
And that's a bit of what Lifelover was too, that we always liked to try boundaries and see what we could do and what we can get away with, and how much jokes we can make while still being serious without being pretentious.
Well, see, I'm not saying this just because like you're one of my personal favorites, but the big like analysis I have is you guys are real. I'm not trying to criticize, the legacy bands of, from Norway, and a lot of great new bands as well in the genre, but
it's different.
Yeah, it's real in the sense that Lifelover writes some of the most disturbing, most brutally honest, darkest aspects of humanity, and you don't need Satan to do it. You could just write about the evils of just being...
And Satan's there.
Yeah.
Satan's always there.
Of course. Yeah. But I think in the sense that you express the agony of just being. And I think that alone
and by using the word Satan or the devil, you're using a shortcut.
Yeah.
We're portraying Satan in essence, but without the shortcuts. We're doing it on a extra level, which is what you can do if you're actually practicing the spiritual aspect of it, instead of being like a hobbyist.
But one thing that resonates with it in the sense that there is such an essence of realness because there is some humor that's incorporated into your sound. There is some funny aspects. I've watched the live footage, and then there's plenty of things that I've had just as much laughs, as much as anger, as much as despair. It is an essence of every. I feel like it's an essence of every form of human darkness in a sound through the sound of Lifelover, and because there is humor, like when you look at the history of comedy, it's dark, it's evil, and I feel like you don't need to portray anything. I mean, I think we could both agree that there are certain bands, not even just in black metal, but that try too hard to be edgy or try too hard to be evil. I don't see that in any of it because
and that's why it doesn't work.
Or it works
because it's not real. It's an image.
Yeah. And I don't think it's an image in Lifelover. I think it's not a gimmick by any means. Some people can misinterpret it as that, but I think there's an essence of realness.
That's because they are shallow-minded and they expect people, just because other artists do it as an image, they expect everyone else to also have their artist persona as an image. Mm-hmm. They can't get it into their mind that there are actual people that live. They practice, they're walking the walk or the walking the talk or whatever you call it.
Definitely.
There are people like that, and especially here in Scandinavia, and Sweden and Norway are especially famous for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, the Icelandic people is on a level by their own as well.
Well, they have the extra layer of isolation there. I was in Iceland before that trip to Sweden, and it's pretty remarkable. And then at the Faroe Islands as well. So.
Yeah, it's special too.
I do want to ask this because there is the saying, we are what we create, but sometimes when that darkness and isolation, you said one of my favorite quotes ever, and that is, being an artist is much more destructive than being alone. And I want to know, in the end, sometimes we can become victimized by our own product when darkness and the negative aspects of humanity are the fuel to our fire. Is there an art to managing this chaos so this way you don't become victimized by our own product? Is there like an art to managing it? Because sometimes it can become so deteriorating that we almost lose ourselves before we have a finished piece,
Well, I think most people or most practices refer to it as meditation. But unfortunately, there are popularized ideas and versions of meditation that unfortunately limits people's ability or even interest in pursuing meditation, because they think it has to be a certain specific thing. But a meditation can be almost anything, as long as it puts you in a different mindset. And by going towards that mindset, you are compartmentalizing and distancing yourself from whatever is bothering you otherwise in your life in that moment, because through that meditation, no matter if it's like going out on a walk, listening to music in headphones, taking a nap, a bath, a shower, cooking, or anything that can be a bit ritualistic and monotonous in its nature, if you really think about it, that can become a meditation. It doesn't have to be just sitting down in silence. As long as it's done with intent and frequently as possible. And once again, it also doesn't have to be like 30 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever works for you. And as long as you can keep it up, that will be the tool that sets that side of you free and enables you to have a different perspective on yourself, instead of being locked into, oftentimes it's easy to project yourself and your ideas onto others, and that's exactly what others do to you as well, because they have their own idea of who you are as a person, which colors their expectations of you and what they think you will do or what you're supposed to do. And that's, of course, a big thing. That if you expect yourself to do something, or think that others expect you to do something, and you can't live up to that, that's a problem.
Expecting others to do anything is expecting others to solve your problems or to help you. Like it's not worth it. Humans are a great source of inspiration. We are, we are surrounded by our fellow man, and it's always great. But expecting a human to do anything for you is the biggest mistake you can make. Not even just as an artist.
It's very appealing, of course, because shortcuts are appealing. But the main thing about shortcuts is that they usually don't work. But unfortunately, everyone has these dream scenarios where they have heard about a shortcut that works, and it's so alluring and so attractive that they will try it instead of taking the longer road, which is always more rewarding. But people think they can get the same results by putting in less effort. But
nope.
That's a trick to it. It's like, it's not tricking yourself, but if that's what you need to do for the long road to happen, and not to take the shortcut, then you need to trick yourself to believing in that. Well, I can take the shortcut, but it won't hurt me to take this longer road, because I will most likely pick something else up on the way, which in turn will maybe not reward me in this pursuit, but it might reward me in other pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the beauties of taking a longer road and having patience, because you will always learn something along the way, and it will always come to use some other time.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, patience was never my greatest strength, hence why I live in New York. But like, it really is amazing that when you do wait for things, sometimes we feel like, I think it's easy to make the mistake that sometimes waiting is a waste of time. That every minute that you spend waiting, you're throwing other opportunities out the window. So maybe people tend to shy away from that. But I did just recently read a book about the artistic journey, and that sometimes we get so focused on the ball that we end up experiencing the ball and chain, and we ultimately don't realize that waiting, it may just be part of the artistic process as much as drawing it or recording it.
Absolutely.
Does inspiration, though, the topic of inspiration, does that just strike you when you least expect it? Or being that, you very much are involved with nature and you have many different passions and mediums, that you actually seek out the inspiration? Do you maybe like go and look for it? Or do you have to just let it strike you, regardless of how long it takes?
Well, they are connected, because I don't go out in nature on walks for the sake of being inspired, but since I do take the walks, I end up being inspired. But if I don't find something that creates ideas for a song, or if I don't see something I want to take a picture of, then I've still had a nice walk, which is good for my mind and good for my body. So there is only a victory and no loss.
Mm-hmm.
And same as if I'm practicing guitar or piano here in my studio, I might end up composing a song or recording something. But I still need to practice. So there's only positives to the pursuit and engaging in this practice.
Do you feel
and of course, different times have different intent. So of course, there will be times when I have a specific goal in mind, and then it's of course it's easier to actually compose something, because I'm listening for maybe a certain frequency. If I notice there is a kind of weather I like, which I know that if there is wind and mist, there are places I can go to capture something, or if it's snowing or if it's raining, and so on. And of course, every season have different benefits.
Does evolution, as an artist, we all evolve one way or another, can you dictate your own evolution, or does evolution just have to happen like when you're not even thinking about it in a way?
It doesn't one doesn't exclude the other, but for each different project or band that I have, they don't evolve at the same speed, because what it means to evolve is different depending on what kind of results you're going for. And Hypothermia is that's my lifetime project. It's the reason why I live. Like, if I didn't have hypothermia, I would be a rotting corpse in a forest somewhere. Like, I wouldn't be interested in living if I didn't have hypothermia. I don't care about my other bands to the same extent. But I have about a dozen or so releases composed that are waiting to be recorded. So
I can't wait.
I think and then I have other projects too, of course, but I think it will take me maybe 20 more years, and then we'll see what happens after that. But usually, like, I thought I would be done by 30, and soon I'm turning 40, so that just proves that something new will always show up where you least expect it, or especially where you expect it, or
Yeah. I think we're always, an artist, it never leaves them. It can't leave them. It's something like, there are people who say, I used to be an artist, being a painter myself, or I'm a tattooer outside of this. And like, there's people who say, oh, I used to be an artist. It's like, no, maybe you used to draw, but maybe you weren't an artist in the sense that they say a laborer works with their hands, a craftsman works with their hands and their head, and an artist works with their hands and their head and their heart. In that sense. So I feel like an artist,
it makes sense.
Yeah, an artist would never leave. You have multiple mediums in which you create with too. You're a visually oriented artist, and you've done a lot of the artwork for your bands. So depending on the medium of art that you work with as well.
Yeah, I took that picture of that album you have.
Yep, and I love it. They're both works of art in itself. Does the medium of art that you work with resonate with you differently too, or is it a different creative mindset if you're working with sound versus visuals and so on?
Well, that touches a bit on what I mentioned earlier when it comes to meditation. That the more reasons you have to do it, the better, because then it's harder to make excuses not to. And since I'm so inspired and influenced by nature and different landscapes that I return to in every kind of weather, every kind of season, to capture different aspects of it, there is it feeds itself, and it's hard to describe just how much it means over the years, and for my different bands, since sometimes if I feel like I can wait years to release an album if I don't have the right cover for it, or if I don't have the right symbol for it, I won't release it either. So there are many levels to something.
I wanted to talk a little bit. We'll fast forward now to Ritualmord, because you just sent me the album. This is extraordinary. It really creates an atmosphere, and it really brings me into another dimension that reminds me of what attracted me to your work to begin with, but now looking at it in a context with the better days for me that do lie ahead. But I'm wondering, with your ambient sound, because you have Consider Suicide, A Symphony to the Void, and now this ambience, how do you distinct the two in a way? Because I feel like I get the same sort of fulfillment from all of them in a way. They have their differences, but I still kind of listen to them for the same reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, when it comes to what songs I choose for the other projects that are more, especially instrumental, that's inspired by places, and it's like a tribute to those places. And of course, there will be songs that could have been considered suicide that I chose for Ritualmord instead, but then I rearranged them and how I perform the different guitar parts and what effects I'm using for them to, instead of being like a 15-minute post-rock song, I can turn that into a 4 or 6 minute like post-rock infused black metal song or post-punk or whatever.
Do you find, because you make such a great use of technology and have all these different effects, but you're inspired so much by nature that doesn't have any of that technology involved, how do you does maybe the use of technology almost, for lack of better words, contradict the feeling that the nature gives you in a way?
Well, that's one of the I'm searching for the right word. I haven't been talking English as much the past week because I've been talking to a lot of print houses here in Sweden preparing for the release of Ritualmord. And we're actually having the release party at Sound Pollution on the release day.
Wow. Yeah. I came to Sound Pollution.
So that's a huge honor too, of course, because it's... but yeah, I was searching for the word here. Could you ask me the question again?
Of course.
Then I should be able to.
Yeah, no, of course. Just with the use, you have such a great use of technology to describe your emotions with nature. But the use of, like having different effects in your studio and stuff, and nature, like they're two atmospheres that very much contradict each other in a way. So how do you sort of capture that ambiance? Like, do you feel that the use of technology almost contradicts the ambiance of nature in a way?
Like, it could, but one of the things that I try to do when I'm using different guitar pedals, or if I'm using some synthesizer or something else, I use it to amplify the nature. So I'm trying to see, I'm not using effect chain just for the sake of it, because that would remove the essence of what inspired it. Like if I have a sample of water, and then of course it wouldn't make sense to put too much of some effects on it, because it turns it into something else. But that might be the goal. But then of course in some other song, the goal might be to just with intent express exactly what that sample is, and then I will choose other effects to enhance it. So and the same with guitar. Like sometimes I want it to sound like strings or some other instrument. So there is so many different ways to use effects.
Definitely.
And that's one of the things that I've been exploring a lot with Consider Suicide, and especially working with my friend Dea in Belgium. Like he's been my co-producer and co-musician, and like he's doing like all the lead guitars or backup guitars, all the drums, all the bass on Ritualmord, and all the Consider Suicide albums the past like 10 years. So
works great because you have so many albums with that. And then and now just for the final, I have a final 2-part questions I have for the Exorcist Wisdom, because we're going longer than I expected. But with forming Ritualmord now, reconnecting with 1853. Now, as it says before, this is not Lifelover. It says purely that. But I do love how, it visually connects with Pulver and all that. But how did, I know this is probably going to be the longest question, but like, how did you and 1853 sort of reconnect, and what made you want to make this music again, and how did the results come of Ritualmord and not, sort of like redoing what we heard on Pulver or Erotic, etc.?
Well, we've been friends for 20 years, and it's not like we reconnected as friends, because we've been hanging out several times a year for the past like 20 years, but especially the past decade, because he moved back to Stockholm this year, but he was living in Gothenburg before then, and that's just an hour away from where I live. So because of that, we were getting closer, and he didn't have other bands or projects for a while. And I felt like I wanted to do something that wasn't hypothermia or considered suicide. And for many of my lyrics or my guitar songs that I composed, they didn't fit with Cal in Stockholm. So I was left with a lot of material that I couldn't do anything with it. And I didn't want to wait several years to find the time to record it with other people. So I asked 1853 if he was interested in joining the band, because I used to have it with another person, but he and I, we grew apart. That's the best and kindest way to say it, and because that happens sometimes. And it was a perfect time then for about 5 years ago to ask 1853 if he was interested in joining my project. And since then, we have recorded some songs and EPs and just exchanging a lot of ideas. And first, we have had no plans to make an album. We were thinking about just doing EPs as like a concept. But then when I moved here, because I had to sell my house during the pandemic for different reasons, not just because of the pandemic, but it didn't help. And when I was exploring nature around this area, I happened upon, I was walking on one of the mountains that surrounds this village where I live now. And I saw this field of white flowers, just like I did 15 years earlier when I took the picture for Pulver.
Wow.
And I had this idea that this is too stupid to not be great. I have to do this. So I asked 1853 to come here and help me take the pictures.
Yeah.
And that was about 3 years ago now.
Wow. That's around the time.
It was actually on my birthday 3 years ago, 3 springs ago.
It's funny. 3 years ago is when I first reached out to one of your pages to do an interview with you. So it makes perfect sense. Bonus question I wanted to ask before we go. I could be wrong in theorizing, but who is she? I heard she's no longer with us.
She's the granddaughter of one of her grandmother was married to my grandfather. So she's not my cousin by blood, but by marriage.
Oh, wow.
So my mother grew up with her father and his 3 brothers. And they are from the north of Sweden, and my grandfather is from the south, and he liked to travel, and they got to know each other. And then 30 years later she comes along, and she was just interested in art and weird music, and she lived in the countryside and didn't have a lot of friends, and I liked just drinking with people and taking weird pictures and photographing nature. And I asked her if she wanted to do a photo art project. And that was before we had decided what direction to take Lifelover in. And I took these pictures, and we decided that this would be interesting combination, because no one knew what Lifelover was, so it was a perfect way also for a new band to have a very striking, visually appealing album cover. And especially back then, because that's one of my first memories, when I was 8 or 9 years old. I would go away from my grade school, and just like a neighborhood away from it, like a block away, there was the local record store. So I would go there on all my breaks in school. Instead of playing with people, I would go there and listen to whatever new music they had that week. And of course, when you don't have a lot of money, and at that age, you go a lot by the cover.
Of course.
It still takes some courage, because back then you had to take an album from the store and go to the clerk at the desk and ask them if you could listen to it. Because you couldn't just search it and listen to it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's how I discovered a lot of music when I was growing up. And I always think about all of that when I design like a cover and the whole packaging of an album and a release. That it should be something that if you walk by it in a store, it should catch your eye and you should wonder, what does that sound like?
Yeah. This to me is more iconic than Dawn of the Black Hearts. It's more iconic than Prometheus and the Fire of Demise. I think that this is, because it showcases the beauty of darkness and the beauty of despair and all that. So I think that this is just one of the most iconic album covers, if at least for me. Because
I agree.
Yeah, so I believe Eleanor was her name,
exactly.
If I'm correct. So like, just absolutely a beautiful cover. I needed to make sure I asked that at least once. So before we go, I want to not only thank you for your time and for making this happen, but thank you on a personal level for the inspiration and the much needed music that helped me through easily some of the darkest times of my personal life. I just want to know, is there anything else? You mentioned that we got a release show at Sound Pollution to promote the debut of Ritualmord. What else could we be expecting? If you would like to promote, feel free to plug away.
Thanks. Well, it's not a show since we don't perform live. It's just a signing session and like a meet and greet. And we're hosting it for like 2.5 hours. So that's exactly enough time to listen through the album 2 times.
Wow.
And then after that, we're going to have like a release party on our Bandcamp in the evening. So people can see me and 1853 on like how we're doing this now and ask us questions or just listen to the album along with us. So that's what we're planning right now. And that will be, of course, if they follow us on Instagram or because that's our most, I update that every day. And also by doing that on our profile there, you can easily see our Bandcamp. So, and you can follow us there too, to not miss out on anything Ritualmord. So that's what I would mostly like to promote.
Awesome.
Because I'm releasing this myself. Like, this is a self-released album, and it takes a lot of effort. And I'm investing like 1/3 of my yearly salary into this. So I really hope that people will appreciate it. But if they don't, that's their loss. And I will just move on to the next thing and prove them wrong, because I believe that this is a great album and a great project, and with time it will persevere, and people will find it.
You emailed.
And they need to find it, just like you found the Lifelover like 15 years later than some other people. That's fine, because that's when you needed it.
Yep, exactly.
And hopefully other people will find Ritualmord and This Is Not Lifelover when they need it 15 years from now.
I will say, you emailed it to me when I was at Decapitated. I was watching a Decapitated show. I immediately went to the restroom at the venue to listen to that, and that was more important to me than that show. So no offense to Decapitated. You were great. But thank you so much. Everybody, Kim Carlsson of Lifelover, Ritualmord, Consider Suicide, Sympathy to the Void, Kral, and Hypothermia. This is Alex from Heaven, New York. We will see you next time.